Cletus McFarland will return to the ARCA Menards series next week, while NASCAR driver Josh Berry calls the series horrible. Plus, we talk about the major upset at the Pit Crew Challenge last night. Welcome back to the Breaking Bob channel. Hope y'all are doing well on this Saturday morning, as it's a loaded motorsports weekend as we creep closer to Memorial Day weekend next week. Of course, the biggest racing weekend in America. Very excited for that. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We're always talking NASCAR and motorsports on a daily basis, and we've got a lot to get into as it's NASCAR All-Star Weekend. We've got a lot to get into, but let's get into the practice and qualifying last night for the All-Star race. Of course, the Pit Crew Challenge, where the drivers are the ones that kind of take a backseat to the pit crews to get to be the stars of the show for the night. I think it's a really cool thing. Of course, you get the social media. Bring it back to the Charlotte Arena. I understand that, but I think that this is a really cool balance, and I'll talk about that why. But last night, for the second year in a row, we had an open car from not the main All-Star race win the Pit Crew Challenge, as Ty Gibbs' 54 team won last year. This year, it's Michael McDowell and the 71 Spire team winning the Pit Crew Challenge. And an awesome story for that team. It's a Hendrick development, basically pit crew. And none of those guys had a full-time season coming into this year on the pit road for the Cup Series. They're all very young. A lot of them have college football experience, as the broadcast noted last night, but you could just see how much it meant to that 71 Spire team. It was a really cool story, an underdog story, because this was a team that was ranked 31st, 32nd in the regular season pit crew rankings. It wasn't like they were a team that everyone had their eyes on watching this, but that pit time that they had stuck through the night. You slowly saw it as it worked its way through the All-Star field. You thought, oh my goodness, they actually might have a chance here. And it came down to where it looked like William Byron on the last chance. The broadcast tried to hype it up, but no shot. And I wish we could have seen the actual pit times on there. That was the one qualm I had with the All-Star broadcast last night. Otherwise, I thought they handled it really well. I thought you got to see the drivers really take a backseat, like I said, to the pit crews, and it was really cool for them to get a night to be highlighted. And $100,000, you could tell the competitiveness for those guys really came out. It was really cool for Spire and that 71 team to be on the pole like that, or not the pole, but to win the Pit Crew Challenge. It was Brad Keselowski, the Kesler, as the broadcast had on that graphic last time. It was a weird graphic. Brad winning the pole for the main race, the All-Star main event. And then in the All-Star Open format, Shane Van Gisbergen on the pole, potentially correlated with a long practice session right before that, as he was able to get a little bit more comfortable on that 3-lap format where you have to pit once. SVG really showed his braking prowess going into the pits. That was where he and Brad Keselowski both really caught their advantage on the rest of the field, was on pit entry. And, for SVG, I think that a lot of people, I may do a video on this next week, because everyone's ready to say, oh, well, maybe he's ready to get replaced by Connor Zilic instead of Daniel Suarez, potentially. The way that his season is, he hasn't been in a Cup Series car for most of these tracks, and to have 20 minutes of practice going into these qualifying and racing weekends where you're buried in track position, learning on the fly with these guys who have raced here 5, 10, 15 times, you're against the grain already. So I think this was a moment where we get to step back and say, that's the Shane Van Gisbergen talent that we expected coming over here from Australia. And with that said, I do really like this All-Star qualifying format. I know there's some people out there that want to see them go back to Charlotte and do the full throttle pit road acceleration, but I think this is a really cool balance. Like I said, the only thing I want to see is the actual pit crew times on the broadcast. That way you're able to keep up with it, because it felt like we were trying to almost keep up with it as we go until we got a live shot of the Spire team celebrating every time that they made it through another team they had passed. But no, I thought that Fox handled it pretty well. This was a good way for them to go out. Hopefully they can keep that momentum going for the All-Star heat races tonight and the All-Star weekend. Let's rewind back to Friday morning, though, where it was announced that everyone's favorite YouTuber outside of Breaking Bob, Cletus McFarland, announced that he will be making his return to the ARCA Menards series for his third race in the 2025 season at the Charlotte Motor Speedway next weekend, a part of the Memorial Day weekend events. Friday night, we're going to have Cletus back in that 30 Rhett Jones Racing Kinetic Mustang. And, this is really going to be the first real test. The development starts now for Garrett Mitchell, Cletus McFarland. This is going to be his first intermediate oval, 1.5 miles with Charlotte. You're not going to be able to just stay in the draft and stay full throttle and work your way through with Daytona and Talladega, what he's raced in. This is going to be different for him. So this is a real test for him. I just want to see him get clean laps. I think for him, the biggest thing is just bring it home in one piece. See if you can stay on the lead lap for as long as possible. Knowing the ARCA Menards series, you're going to have cars down a lap, 5-6 laps in. But for Cletus, the biggest thing is just getting these clean laps. He's already announced he'll be running in the Bristol race and ARCA in the fall. So this will be, I guess, fourth race he'll have on the calendar for ARCA. And it shows that he is serious about developing his career in the NASCAR series. I know he's talked about his goals, Daytona 500 by 26. He's probably going to have to push that down the line. But he's realistic that he does need to get this intermediate experience. You can't just go to Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta. This is where you really have to hone in your racecraft and get these green flag laps. So very excited to see what Cletus looks like next week. This will be, like I said, the first real test for him and that 30 team. And speaking of the ARCA Menards series, who is off this weekend, they caught a ricochet yesterday at the NASCAR Media Bullpen at North Wilkesboro, where Josh Berry, the number 21 Wood Brothers driver, really threw some shade at him as he was talking about how the Cars Tour, getting their first main race on cable last night on FS1 with Kevin Harvick and Dale Jr. in the booth. It was a really good broadcast, by the way. He was talking about how it was exciting for the Cars Tour to be a part of the NASCAR weekend and to be on the TV side, especially to get the exposure for the first time in their series history to be on cable. And then threw just an interesting jab at ARCA. I'll read this whole quote, though. Quote, it's obviously really cool to get them on FS1. The biggest thing to me is just the racing is good. Hopefully tonight puts on a good show, but they go to tons of different tracks around here that put on really good racing. So the biggest thing is I just hope it draws a good audience and gets people excited about where they can go to do it more often. I'll be honest, I watch ARCA races and they're horrible. Cars Tour puts on a way better product to be on TV, and they deserve a spot like that. I think hopefully tonight they do that. Hopefully they don't get too crazy, everybody getting wild on television. Hopefully we can get the races started, stay on time, but I'm excited to see how it does. I think it's a great product. Oh, that aged just like milk, Josh. I'm sorry, unfortunately, but the first 30 laps of that Cars Tour race, really, the first 2 laps, you lost probably a lot of the broadcast audience that came in following the Cup Series practice and qualifying, because 2 laps in, you get Lainey Busey on the front row. She takes herself out and then stacks up the field behind her, takes out about a dozen cars. They have to red flag the race for a second after 2 laps. And then another incident. We didn't get to the competition caution, it felt like, for another hour at lap 25. And just felt very ARCA-y. Not to drag ARCA through the mud, but we understand what ARCA is at this point. There's about 7 to 8 to 10 cars that'll stay on the lead lap, and the rest of the teams just bring enough money to have a car show up. It's not those teams' fault. It's just the way that the system is right now. And for Josh Berry to throw some slander at them when the Cars Tour and ARCA serve very different purposes. Yes, they both can develop drivers. You look at Butterbean, you look at Josh Berry. They've used the Cars Tour as a way to elevate themselves to the next level. But it's also a short track racing series. ARCA serves as a different purpose. And I think it's easy for us to kind of throw the barbs and shade. Oh, ARCA brakes, ARCA this, ARCA that. And there's definitely issues with ARCA. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to see cars get lapped 4 or 5 laps into an intermediate oval, but that's where we are. But we can also accept the fact that the Cars Tour and ARCA are very different things. So for Josh Berry to come out and say that it's horrible and the Cars Tour deserves their TV spot, we need to build up the motorsports around us. Not everything is competing, and I hate to see that. It's very easy to throw ARCA under the bus. And for Josh Berry, who has grown up with a grassroots in racing, clawing his way up there without the sponsorship, without the funding, he was connected to Dale Jr. and got up to the Cars Tour and was able to use that to work his way up through it. He should realize better than anyone that the opportunities are limited, and to the fact that the ARCA series is even there to give drivers a chance to at least get these laps in, to potentially work their way up through the NASCAR ladder. Just think it's a little tone deaf for Josh Berry. But let me know what you think about Josh Berry's comments. Obviously, there's a little bit of truth to it, but I just don't think that was the way to go about it. I think we could just build up the Cars Tour without completely dragging the ARCA series in when they have nothing to do with this. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down there. As we wrap up this video, we've got Indy 500 qualifying today. The trucks will be here in about an hour or two, and we've got the All-Star heats tonight, so I'm sure there'll be some coverage on the channel tonight, and definitely the All-Star races tomorrow. Make sure you stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you did like what you see. It helps me out a ton here at Breaking Bob, and I will be back with more coverage as we ramp up for the biggest weekend in American racing next week with the Memorial Day Kyle Larson doing the double, hit the wall yesterday, got him back out there. Impressive for the McLaren team, but we'll see what happens throughout the week. I'll see you next time. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.